I did not chase after them. I did not call. I did not send a single text message explaining myself or begging for an invitation that should have never been withdrawn in the first place. I simply walked back to my truck, started the engine, and drove home in the dark. That was the night my son told me I was not welcome at my own granddaughter's first birthday party. My name is not important. What I am is a 63-year-old man who spent 4 decades building something from nothing. I grew up in a small town outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, the son of a mechanic and a school cafeteria worker. We did not have much. My father's hands were always black with grease, and my mother always smelled like industrial cleaner and canned green beans. They were good people who worked themselves to the bone so that I could have slightly more than they did. I promised myself early on that if I ever had children, they would never have to wonder whether the lights would stay on or whether there would be food on the table. I kept that promise, probably too well. My son is 34 years old. I will call him my son because that is what he is, even when he makes it difficult to remember why I am proud of that fact. He married a woman 3 years ago. I will call her my daughter-in-law. She comes from a family with opinions about everything and the confidence to share those opinions, whether or not anyone asked. From the beginning, I sensed that she saw me as a problem to be managed rather than a father-in-law to be respected. I tried not to let that bother me. I told myself that young couples needed space, that I should not crowd them, that love sometimes meant stepping back. So I stepped back, but I also kept writing the checks. When my son and daughter-in-law announced they had found a house they wanted to buy, I was the one who covered the down payment. $47,000. I transferred it without hesitation because I remembered being young and broke and staring at a piece of property I wanted but could not reach. I did not want my son to feel that particular helplessness. What I did not fully anticipate was that the gesture would be received not as sacrifice but as expectation. After the down payment, it was the car. My daughter-in-law's vehicle needed replacing, and my son called me on a Tuesday afternoon with the particular tone he uses when he wants something but is trying to make it sound like a casual conversation. I bought the car. Then it was the medical bills when my granddaughter was born early and spent 11 days in the NICU. I did not blink. I wired the money before they even finished explaining the situation. Then it was the nursery furniture, the baby equipment, the membership to a gym my daughter-in-law wanted near their neighborhood. I paid for all of it. I am not telling you this to make myself sound generous. I am telling you this because what happened next requires you to understand the full weight of what I had given and what I was about to lose. My granddaughter turned 1 year old on the 14th of September. I had known about the party for 2 months. My son mentioned it in July. Said it would be a small gathering at their house, family and a few close friends. I bought a gift. I had it wrapped. I had it sitting on my kitchen table for 3 weeks because every time I walked past it, I felt something warm move through my chest. A grandfather feeling. The kind that makes you realize that whatever you sacrificed to get here was worth it. 8 days before the party, my son called me. I remember exactly where I was standing. I was on my back porch watching the sun go down behind the tree line, holding a glass of sweet tea that had already gone warm. He started the conversation the way people do when they have rehearsed what they are going to say but are still nervous about saying it. He asked how I was doing. He made a comment about the weather, and then he told me. He said that he and his wife had decided to keep the party very small. Immediate family only, he said. And by immediate family, he clarified, he meant her side, her parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, and his wife. He said they wanted it to feel intimate. He said he hoped I would understand. I did not say anything for a long moment. I stood there on my porch with the warm tea in my hand and watched a hawk circle something in the field behind my property. I asked him to clarify what he meant by immediate family. He repeated it. Just her parents and siblings. He said they were not trying to make it a big thing. I told him I understood, and then I said goodbye and ended the call. I went inside. I sat down at my kitchen table across from the wrapped gift. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and stared at the recurring transfer I had set up 14 months earlier. Every month, on the first $1,200 moved automatically from my account to my sons. It covered exactly half of their mortgage payment. I had set it up after my daughter-in-law mentioned, in passing, that they were stretched thin with the baby costs. I had set it up without being asked, without conditions, without a single conversation about when or whether it would end. I did not cancel it that night. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I lay in the dark for a long time thinking about my own father. I thought about a Christmas morning when I was 9 years old and he drove 40 minutes in the snow to my uncle's house because my uncle had forgotten to invite us and my father had found out through a neighbor. He showed up anyway. He knocked on the door and held his hat in his hands and my uncle looked embarrassed and let us in. I remember thinking my father was the bravest man I had ever seen. I also remember much later understanding that what my father had done was not brave. It was a habit he could never break. The habit of making himself small so that other people would let him stay in the room. I was not going to do that. The morning after my son's call, I woke up before sunrise, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table until the light came through the window. Then I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and I canceled the transfer. I did not send a message. I did not call to explain. I simply removed it the way it had been added, quietly and without ceremony. I put the wrapped birthday gift in the closet of the spare bedroom. I called my old friend Raymond, who lives about 40 minutes away and who has known me since we were both young men making bad decisions in parking lots. I told him I had the weekend free and asked if he wanted to drive up to the lake house I own in northeastern Oklahoma and spend a few days fishing. Raymond said yes before I finished the sentence. We left Friday morning. I turned my phone to silent sometime around noon and put it in the glove compartment of my truck. Raymond and I spent 2 days doing almost nothing. We fished in the early morning. We cooked whatever we caught on the small gas grill on the dock. In the evenings, we sat in lawn chairs and watched the water go flat and silver as the sun dropped. Raymond asked me once, on the second evening, whether something was going on. I told him a shortened version. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always appreciated about Raymond. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Some people do not know what a foundation looks like until it cracks." I did not respond to that, but I thought about it for the rest of the night. I turned my phone back on Sunday morning on the drive home. There were 22 missed calls from my son, 14 text messages, 3 voicemails. There were also 2 missed calls from a number I did not recognize, which I later understood was my daughter-in-law calling from a different phone when I had apparently blocked hers without fully realizing I had done it during a moment of calm deliberateness the week before. I did not listen to the voicemails until I was parked in my own driveway. I sat in the truck with the engine off and played them through the speakers. The first voicemail was from my son. His voice had the quality of someone who had just realized that the floor beneath them was not as solid as they thought. He said the bank had sent a notice. He said there must be some kind of error. He asked me to call him back as soon as possible. The second voicemail was also from my son. The floor quality was gone. What replaced it was something closer to panic. He said he had checked with the bank and the transfer had been canceled from my end. He said he needed to understand what was happening. His voice cracked slightly on the word happening. The third voicemail was different. It was quieter. He said, "Dad, I think I made a mistake. I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but I need you to know that we are not going to be able to make this month's payment without your help. And I am asking you to please call me back." I sat in my truck for another 10 minutes after that last voicemail. I was not enjoying it exactly. But I was not going to pretend it did not clarify something important. There is a difference between a child who loves you and is thoughtless, and a child who loves you only when the infrastructure you provide is invisible. I had been invisible infrastructure for a long time. The party was just the moment I finally became visible by disappearing. I went inside. I made dinner. I watched a baseball game on television. My son came to my house the following Tuesday evening, unannounced, which is something he had not done in over a year. I heard the truck in the driveway and looked through the window before answering the door. He looked like he had not slept well. His wife was not with him, which I noted. I opened the door and let him in. I did not say anything beyond, "Hello." I offered him water, which he accepted. We sat at the kitchen table, which is where all the real conversations in my life have happened. He told me that the bank had assessed a late fee. He told me that his wife's parents had lent them money to cover the gap this month, but that it was a loan and they expected it back. He told me that he and his wife had been arguing. He told me he had not realized until the transfer disappeared how much of their stability had been built on something I was providing quietly in the background. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. I asked him if he had understood, when he called me 8 days before his daughter's birthday party, what he was telling me. He said he thought I would understand. That phrase again. He said his wife had felt that her family had not had enough time with the baby and that she wanted one event that was just her side. He said he did not want to fight about it. I told him that I understood all of that. I told him that people are allowed to have private family events. I told him that his wife is allowed to want time with her own parents and siblings without me in the room. I told him that none of that was the point. The point, I told him, was that you do not exclude someone from your child's life, and then expect that person to silently continue financing yours. He was quiet for a long time after that. He asked me if I was going to start the transfer again. I told him I did not know yet. He asked what I needed to see from him. I appreciated the question. It was the first time in the conversation that he sounded like someone trying to solve a problem rather than someone trying to recover a resource. I told him I needed to see his daughter. I told him I wanted to give her the birthday gift that was still sitting in my spare bedroom closet. I told him I wanted to have a direct conversation with his wife. Not through him, not through text messages, but face-to-face the way adults handle things. And I told him that after that conversation I would decide what came next. He nodded. He finished his water. He stood up and asked if he could hug me before he left. I said yes. It was not a comfortable hug, not the kind between people who have been at ease with each other. It was the kind between people who are trying to remember how to be what they used to be. He left around 8:30. I locked the door and stood in the kitchen for a moment. Then I went to the spare bedroom, opened the closet, and took out the wrapped gift. I set it back on the kitchen table. The conversation with my daughter-in-law happened 4 days later, at their house, over coffee she made without being asked. She was not the person I had expected to see. She was quieter. She had the look of someone who had recently been shown a version of themselves they did not entirely like. She said she had not thought about it from my perspective. She said the word perspective carefully, like someone who had been coached to use it but was not entirely sure of its weight. I told her I was not asking for an apology. I told her I was asking for honesty, going forward on both sides. I told her that I had supported their family because I wanted to, not because I expected gratitude at every turn, but that there was a difference between not expecting gratitude and being treated as someone whose presence was optional when it was convenient, and whose wallet was essential when it was needed. She looked at her coffee cup for a moment. Then she said, "That's fair." 2 words, but she said them without the defensive tone I had been braced for, and that counted for something. My granddaughter came toddling into the kitchen about 10 minutes into the conversation, dragging a stuffed rabbit by one ear across the tile floor. She looked up at me with the particular expression that 1-year-olds have when they are deciding whether they recognize you. Then she walked directly to me and grabbed my pant leg with one fist, which is a thing babies do that destroys every argument you were planning to have. I picked her up. I held her against my chest. She grabbed my collar and looked at my face very seriously the way young children study old faces like they are reading something. I had brought the gift with me. We opened it at the kitchen table. It was a wooden puzzle with chunky animal pieces that I had spent longer than I care to admit choosing at a toy store 3 weeks earlier. She put the elephant in the wrong hole 4 times and then laughed each time like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened. My son was sitting across the table watching us, and I could see something shifting behind his eyes. I recognized it because I have felt it myself. It is the feeling of understanding something almost too late. I did not restart the automatic transfer. What I did instead was call my son the following Monday and tell him I was willing to help them refinance. I told him I would cover 2 more months while they adjusted their budget, but that after that the mortgage was theirs. Not because I was punishing him, because a man who does not know what holds his house up will never take care of it properly. He said he understood. I told him I hoped he did, not because I needed him to be grateful, but because I needed him to be ready to stand on his own, ready to be the kind of father to his daughter who doesn't need someone else's foundation beneath his feet to feel stable. He was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then he said, "I hear you, Dad." Those 3 words were enough. I hung up the phone and walked out to my back porch. The sun was going down behind the tree line again. The same as the evening he called to tell me I was not invited. I had a glass of sweet tea. It was still warm from the pot. I stood there and watched the hawk, or one very much like it, circle something slow and patient in the field. I had not chased anything. I had not screamed. I had not begged. I had just stopped being invisible and let the silence do what words never could.